Why was everyone pretending not to see her limp? The courtyard shimmered under a sun that punished every shadow. Dust floated like ghosts in the air, caught in the breath of generators that never stopped humming, a constant, low heartbeat of war. Metal clanged, boots scraped, someone cursed at a crate that wouldn't lift. It was another day on the forward base, routine on the surface, restless underneath. And through the center of it all, Sergeant Emily Carter walked, or rather, half-limped. The bandage on her left thigh darkened with a slow, stubborn bloom of red. 3 days ago, she'd been inside an armored truck when an IED turned the road into an open wound. It threw her into the kind of silence that only explosions know, the one that eats sound before giving it back. The truck had flipped, fire had followed, and Emily had crawled through glass and smoke to pull 2 soldiers out. She stayed until the ammo started cooking off, until the air burned too hot to breathe. She hadn't slept since, not really. But here she was, walking through the midday heat, every step measured, jaw locked, gaze fixed straight ahead. A cluster of Navy SEALs leaned against the comms building wall new to this base, clean gear, sharper confidence. They watched her pass, saying nothing for a moment. Then one of them let out a low whistle, the kind meant to sound harmless. "Look at that," he said, smirking. "Can't even walk straight. Guess she's done playing soldier." Laughter followed, short, sharp, ugly. Another voice chimed in, lower, almost gleeful. "Heard she was running the wrong way when it blew." The sound spread like spilled oil across concrete, sticky, hard to clean. Emily didn't look, didn't flinch. She kept her eyes on the tent ahead, the medical station where she was supposed to be resting but couldn't. Not because of pride, not even because of duty. Because rest meant thinking and thinking meant remembering. So she kept moving. Others saw, though. Corporal Ryan Brooks froze mid-step, a coil of radio cable in his hands. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowing. A few meters away, Sergeant Dana Reeves from the Military Police Patrol slowed her walk, gaze fixed on the group. They knew what Emily had done in that convoy. They'd seen her pull bodies from fire. The SEALs didn't, not yet. But this courtyard, this base, it remembered things. It remembered who bled for it. Ryan wanted to speak. The words were already there, cold, precise, sharp enough to cut. But he swallowed them. Not yet. Not until he knew it would matter. Emily passed them and reached the tent. Inside, the air smelled faintly of antiseptic and exhaustion. The physician's assistant glanced up and frowned. "You walk too far," he said, unwrapping the bandage with professional irritation. "I had to," she replied. "The tent was this far away." "Not funny. Only on days when I'm vertical." He sighed. "You medics, stubbornness and heroism in the same skull. It's a wonder you survive." "Mostly stubbornness," she said softly. Outside, the laughter still echoed, faint but lingering. Emily didn't mention it. She didn't need pity, and she didn't have space for rage. There were wounds to clean, forms to sign, and a mind she had to keep busy so it wouldn't replay the blast. But bases like this, they talk. The rumor spread faster than she could walk. Someone claimed they saw a phone out, a camera angled just right. Someone else repeated the words exactly as they'd been said. By evening, a half-dozen people had retold the story, each version sharper than the last. By nightfall, Lieutenant Colonel Janet Morales, base deputy commander, had a folder she hadn't asked for but couldn't ignore. Morales had the kind of voice that cut without raising volume. She was precise, deliberate, and deeply allergic to disrespect. Before she even read the report, she remembered a commendation draft from a few months back. Sergeant Emily Carter. Extraordinary courage under fire. Morales had signed it. Now she stared at a transcript describing her being mocked by men too new to know better. She closed the folder slowly. Then, in a tone that could command a storm, she said, "Get me Commander Porter and Sergeant Reeves, now." Outside, the desert heat had cooled by a few degrees, but the courtyard still held its tension. The SEALs were unaware of what was coming. Some part of them might have even convinced themselves it had been harmless banter. But disrespect is never harmless. It's a virus that eats at the walls from the inside. Morales knew that. So did Porter, though he didn't yet know his team was infected. Ryan Brooks sat on the edge of his cot that night, staring at the same coil of wire he'd carried earlier. He thought about Emily, the quiet way she moved, the scars she carried, the steadiness that made her seem older than her years. He remembered her voice during his first firefight. "Breathe once. Now talk." She'd been calm then, too, because calm saves lives, and because she believed courage wasn't noise, it was persistence. He opened his notebook, wrote one line, then crossed it out. Respect isn't loud. He tried again. Respect listens, then closed it. Across camp, Emily sat on her bunk, uniform folded beside her. She ran a thumb along the edge of the bandage, feeling where the pain ended and the lesson began. She heard the laughter. She'd heard worse before, but something about this time felt different. Not because it hurt more, but because it came from people who should have known better. Elite or not, they'd forgotten the first rule of brotherhood: we protect our own. She wasn't angry, not really. Just tired of how easily some men confuse strength with volume. She lay back, eyes open to the faint ripples of the tent fabric above her. Somewhere in the base, a generator sputtered and caught again. The night pulsed with unspoken things: guilt, pride, exhaustion. Emily whispered a single sentence to no one: "Let it pass," because she believed silence was sometimes stronger than confrontation. But silence has witnesses. Dana Reeves sat in her small office playing back bodycam footage, ambient, mundane, routine patrol visuals, until she found it. A reflection in a comms building window, a group of SEALs, a woman limping past, one of them leaning forward, mouth-forming words she didn't need audio to recognize. The timestamp matched Ryan's notes. She stopped the video, hands steady, heart not. "Got you," she murmured. "Not out of vengeance, out of principle." The next morning, Morales reviewed the footage. Porter stood beside her, jaw set like granite. "We'll address it internally," he said, his tone more defensive than defiant. "No," Morales replied, not looking up. "We'll address it together." He studied her face, saw no give in it, and nodded once. That afternoon, the SEALs gathered at their table in the mess hall. The laughter was quieter now, but the arrogance still lingered. Davies, their leader, leaned back, arms folded. When he noticed Ryan watching him from a few tables over, he smirked again. "Something on your mind, Corporal?" Ryan's voice came out steady. "Yeah, respect." The smirk faltered just a second. "You want to try that again?" Ryan didn't blink. "You mocked a wounded soldier who's done more for this base than you can imagine." A few heads turned. The air thinned. A spoon clinked against a mug somewhere, awkwardly loud. Then Dana's voice cut through, calm and official. "Petty Officer Davies," she said, stepping closer, "you and your team will report to the command tent at 700. Uniform of the day. Bring your integrity." No one laughed this time. That night, Emily sat outside the medical tent, watching the horizon burn orange to purple. She felt the ache in her leg, in her chest. The bass buzzed quietly, the kind of hum that happens before consequences. She didn't know about the summons. She didn't know her name was being defended in rooms she wasn't in. She just knew the wind had shifted. The same courtyard that had burned her once was about to cleanse itself. She reached for her canteen, took a slow sip, and closed her eyes. The desert smelled like metal and resolve. Somewhere nearby, a group of recruits laughed, the easy kind, harmless, human. And she smiled faintly, because not all laughter carried poison. Some was proof that hope still lived here. She pressed a hand against her bandaged leg and whispered again, "Let it pass." But it wouldn't. Not this time. Because some things need to be remembered to be healed. The command tent never felt that big before. At 700 sharp, the desert air already shimmered with heat, and the sky carried that color between gold and glare that makes even confidence squint. Inside, maps covered one wall, grease pencils pinned down by mugs, radios murmuring faintly. The SEAL team stood in a rough line, boots even, expressions not. Commander Porter's trident pin caught the light, hard and small, like judgment made of metal. Beside him, Lieutenant Colonel Janet Morales waited with her arms folded. The stillness before a storm that knows exactly where it will land. No one spoke at first. You could hear the hum of the generator outside, the shuffle of a soldier's weight shifting from one leg to another, and nothing else. Then Morales stepped forward. "Gentlemen," she said, her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. "Yesterday in the courtyard, several of you forgot who you are." Davies tried to hold her gaze. He managed half a heartbeat before looking away. Morales pressed a button on the small recorder on the table. Static hissed, then laughter. The words came next, the same ones that had hung over the base all night. "Look at that. Can't even walk straight. Guess she's done playing soldier." The sound filled the tent like smoke. No one coughed. No one blinked. Porter stared at the ground, jaw working once, twice. When the audio ended, Morales let the silence stay. It hurt more that way. Porter finally looked up. "There are lines," he said quietly. "You crossed the only one that matters." Davies cleared his throat. "Commander, with respect, we didn't know. We assumed." Porter's eyes snapped to him. "You assumed weakness in someone bleeding for you," he said, voice steady. "You assumed your rank made you larger. It made you smaller." Davies' mouth closed. Pride fought shame behind his eyes, and shame started to win. Morales folded her hands behind her back. "Do you know who Sergeant Emily Carter is?" she asked. "Do you have any idea what she's done for this base, for people you've never met?" No one answered. "Of course you don't," she said, "because she never tells her own stories." She opened a folder, thin, creased, lived in. 3 days ago, during a convoy south of Highway 1, Sergeant Carter pulled 2 soldiers from a burning MRAP. She refused evacuation until both were stable. Ammunition was cooking off. She continued care under fire. Her voice stayed even. "She has 2 bronze stars, a purple heart. She's patched men who outrank her, outran her, outtalked her, and she never once asked for applause. And yesterday you laughed at her limp." The air conditioner rattled once and went still. Somewhere outside, a bird screamed a long, raw note. Inside, the room didn't move. Morales looked down the line of men. "You will answer for it," she said. "But before consequences, I want you to understand the cost. Disrespect doesn't just bruise pride, it kills trust. And trust is the only armor we have left." She turned toward the flap of the tent. "Sergeant Reeves, bring her in." A ripple went through the line, confusion, then dread. The tent flap lifted. Emily entered on a crutch, uniform clean, face calm. She saluted. "Ma'am." "Sergeant Carter," Morales said, "please sit." "I'll stand, ma'am." "Suit yourself." Every SEAL in the room looked suddenly fascinated by the dirt on the floor. Emily glanced across them, eyes unreadable. Not pity, not anger, something quieter. She didn't know why she was here, not exactly, but she understood enough. Morales spoke again. "Were you aware of comments made about you yesterday?" "I heard laughter," Emily said. "Did you file a complaint?" "No, ma'am." "Why not?" "Because it wouldn't change what matters." "And what matters?" Morales asked. "That they learn how to treat the next person who limps by." The tent seemed to exhale all at once. Even Porter's shoulders softened. Morales nodded once. "Thank you, Sergeant. You may step outside." Emily gave a brief nod, turned, and left as quietly as she had entered. Her crutch thudded once on the canvas floor, a sound that would linger. When the flap closed, Morales looked back at the men. "You heard her. I hope you were listening." Porter stepped forward. "You want to talk about strength," he said, voice low. "That's it. Not your biceps, not your kill counts, not the stories you tell at the bar. Strength is what walks away when laughter hits like shrapnel." Davies' jaw tightened again, but now it was to hold something else, regret. Morales moved down the line, stopping in front of him. "Petty Officer Davies," she said, "you started it." "Yes, ma'am." "You think you're elite because you carry a trident. You're elite when you act like one, and that means knowing when silence is cheaper than cruelty." "Yes, ma'am." Her gaze flicked to the others. "And the rest of you, every one of you who laughed, who said nothing, who let it happen, congratulations. You proved how quickly discipline evaporates without empathy." No one spoke. She took a slow breath. "Here, what will happen next? Commander Porter and I will determine appropriate consequences. You will cooperate, you will not justify, you will not whisper excuses, you will learn." She turned and left the tent, leaving Porter to fill the quiet. He looked at them for a long time, the way a father looks at sons who have disappointed him. "Dismissed," he said finally. "You'll report back at 1800. When they were gone, he sat down on the edge of the table and rubbed a hand over his face. The day already felt heavy. "Damn it," he whispered to no one. "We're supposed to be better than this." Outside, the sun had climbed higher. Emily stood near the shade line of the tent, breathing in the heat. Dana approached her. "You okay?" "I've been worse," Emily said. "You didn't have to come." "I know." "Why did you?" "Because silence teaches too, but sometimes you have to let people hear the echo." Dana smiled faintly. They heard it. Across the camp, Ryan was rerouting cables, pretending not to listen to the hum of rumor. Everyone knew by noon that the SEALs had been called in. Everyone guessed why. By evening, it wasn't gossip anymore, it was lesson material. That night the base ate dinner quieter. No clatter, no bragging, the kind of quiet that follows realization. Morales wrote her report under a flickering light bulb, neat handwriting, every word measured. Porter added his signature beside hers. "Actions complete," he said. "Not yet," she replied. "Culture doesn't change in one meeting." He half smiled. "Then we'll keep meeting." Outside the command post, the sky bruised itself into dusk. Emily limped back to the medical tent. The PA grumbled at her again, but this time the reprimand softened halfway through. "You're supposed to rest." "I'm vertical, that's rest enough." "You ever gonna take it easy?" "Maybe next war." She smiled when she said it, small and dry. The PA shook his head, muttering about impossible women who make the rest of them look lazy. She sat for a while, alone, hands still, head bent. The sounds of the base melted into background, trucks revering, laughter, good laughter this time, boots on gravel. For a moment she thought maybe the storm had passed. But storms don't pass. They roll, they pause, and they circle back with meaning. 2 hours later she heard shouting outside, urgent, real this time. "Medic," someone yelled, the kind of shout that reaches the bone. Emily grabbed her kit instinctively. The PA moved to block her. "No, sit." "I can still use my hands," she said, already moving. The leg hurt, yes, but pain was an old friend. She stepped out into the heat-soaked night. Near the comms building, the same place the laughter had begun, a Humvee sat at an angle, headlights carving the dark. A young soldier was on the ground, arms split open by a jagged metal edge. Blood pulsed steady, dangerous. Two figures knelt beside him, one shouting for help, the other fumbling with a belt, trying to improvise a tourniquet. Emily recognized the voice. Davies. "High and tight," she said, already lowering herself beside them. He looked up, startled. "Sergeant." "No time, hold pressure here." She pressed his hand against the wound, firm. "You feel that pulse, keep it." He obeyed. She pulled gauze from her pack, movements economical, practiced. "He's going into shock, keep him talking." "What do I say?" Davies asked, breath uneven. "His name, just his name." Davies looked down. "Rodriguez, hey, stay with me, man, you're good, you're good." The soldier blinked, half-conscious. Emily tied off the dressing, checked breathing, nodded once. "He's stable, we move him now." Ryan arrived, out of breath, sliding in beside her. "Doc, I mean Sergeant." "Grab that end," she said. Together they lifted the injured man onto a stretcher, moving with precision only shared crisis can choreograph. Dana cleared a path through the onlookers. "Back up, eyes out." In 90 seconds the bleeding slowed. In 120 it stopped. In 180 the medic team carried Rodriguez away toward the tent lights. Emily leaned back on her heel, sweat streaking her face. The world tilted once, pain reminding her who was boss, and she steadied herself on the crutch. Davies still knelt, hands red. He looked at her like she was gravity itself. "Sergeant," he said quietly. She met his eyes. "Get some water, you're pale." He almost laughed, not mockery, but disbelief at mercy. He nodded, stood slowly, and walked off toward the dark with the weight of understanding pressing down on his shoulders. Later that night, Morales stood outside her office with Porter. "He saved that soldier's life," Porter said. "She did," Morales corrected. "Both of them did," he said after a pause. She nodded. "Good, maybe that's where the change begins." The base slept lighter after that, not because the world had forgiven itself, but because it had started trying. Emily sat outside the tent again, watching the stars. Her leg throbbed. Her hands smelled like antiseptic and sand. She thought of Davy's face, the flicker of realization, the way shame turned into something better. She didn't hate him. She pitied the part of him that had thought cruelty was confidence. Somewhere a radio crackled with soft static. Ryan's voice came through faintly, testing a channel. "Sierra 3-1, copy check." She smiled at the call sign, hers once. She clicked her own radio, low volume. "Copy loud and clear," she whispered. For a moment, she let herself believe things could shift, that respect could grow back like scar tissue, tougher, quieter, still capable of feeling. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of fuel and dawn. Tomorrow would bring hearings, paperwork, the machinery of accountability. But tonight the base held its breath, aware, awake, learning. Because sometimes redemption doesn't arrive with applause. Sometimes it walks on a wounded leg, steady and slow, teaching everyone around it how to move forward again. The courtyard looked different the next morning. Not because anything had changed, the same sand, the same scorch marks, the same hum of machines, but because everyone who walked across it carried the memory of last night. The blood on the concrete had already been washed away, yet its outline lingered in the mind. You could almost hear it under the boots, that sharp whisper of consequence. Petty Officer Davies sat outside the mess tent, untouched coffee cooling beside him. He hadn't slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her hands, steady, precise, moving over the wounded man while his own trembled. He'd been trained for violence, for insertion, extraction, endurance, but not for grace. No instructor ever taught that. Ryan passed by with a clipboard tucked under one arm. He stopped, studied the man who only a day ago had smirked through arrogance. "You good?" Davies gave a humorless smile. "Define good." "Alive, maybe learning." "That one." Davies looked up, sun squinting in his eyes. "She didn't have to help me. She doesn't do things because she has to." Ryan adjusted his grip on the clipboard. "She does them because somebody has to." Then he walked away before Davies could answer. Across the base, Morales reviewed the morning reports. Rodriguez, the injured soldier, was stable, prognosis good. Tourniquet applied correctly, bleeding controlled in the field. Her pen paused on the report. She knew whose hands had done it. She wrote a short addendum in the margin. Assisted by SGT-E Carter and Poe Davies, cooperative field effort noted. It was a small note, but small notes sometimes outlast medals. Commander Porter stepped into her office, eyes rimmed red from lack of sleep. "The men are quiet," he said. "They should be," Morales replied. "They're embarrassed." "Good, that's the seed of accountability." He leaned against the doorframe. "You think Carter will come to the hearing?" "She will if I ask," Morales said, "but she shouldn't have to keep teaching us how to respect her." The hearing was scheduled for noon. By 1100, word had spread. Soldiers straightened uniforms, cleaned boots as if neatness could scrub guilt. Dana Reeves walked the perimeter twice, bodycam on, more out of habit than necessity. She passed Emily outside the medical tent, the crutch beside her knee, a clipboard balanced on her lap. "You ready?" Dana asked. "For what?" "For the show." Emily looked up, eyes a shade lighter in the harsh light. "I thought we already did that." Dana tilted her head. "This one's official." Then it'll be slower, Emily said, half smiling, and louder. When they entered the tent at 1200, the air conditioner hummed like nervous breath. Morale sat at the head table, Porter beside her, arms folded, expression unreadable. The SEAL team occupied the front row, uniforms immaculate. Their faces were. Emily stood at the side, out of the spotlight, watching but not judging. Morales began without preamble. We're here to resolve yesterday's incident and to affirm the standards expected on this base. Sergeant Carter, thank you for being present. Petty Officer Davies, your team will each have the opportunity to speak. No one moved. Then Hart, the youngest, stood. Ma'am, I laughed. The words cracked halfway through. I didn't say the words, but I laughed. That's the same thing. He sat down quickly, eyes wet but steady. Another rose. I said the second part. I thought it was harmless. It was. I'm ashamed. A third. I didn't stop them. That's not a defense. Finally, Davies stood. He didn't hide behind the formal tone SEALs used in debriefs. His voice was lower, almost hoarse. Ma'am, Commander, Sergeant Carter, I let it happen. I started it. I meant it to be a joke. It was. I own it. He hesitated. I understand now who I mocked. I should have known already. Porter's eyes lifted. Why should you have known? Davies swallowed. Because a limp is a chapter, not a punchline. The silence afterward was long, the kind that doesn't need filling. Morales nodded slowly, then reached for the folder on her desk. She opened it to a page and read aloud 2 lines only. During convoy movement south of Highway 1, Sergeant Carter extracted 2 soldiers under fire, refused evacuation until both were stabilized. She closed the folder. That's who you laughed at, she said. Porter stepped forward. His voice carried the weight of an oath rediscovered. Sergeant Carter, years ago you kept one of my men alive in a hangar that smelled like jet fuel and panic. Yesterday, you did it again in a courtyard that remembered laughter. I owe you twice. He turned to his team. Stand. They did. He gave the order quietly. About face. Then he saluted her. The room held its breath. Emily hesitated just long enough for meaning, then returned the salute. Her left leg trembled, but her hand didn't. When the motion ended, Morale's voice filled the space again, steady and mercilessly clear. Petty Officer Davies, demotion 1 grade, removal from current operations roster, reassignment to rehabilitation support rotation, formal letter of censure. She shifted her gaze down the line. Hart, non-judicial punishment, additional cultural awareness duty. All of you will serve 2 rotations in rehabilitation clinics for wounded personnel. You'll learn what pain looks like up close, and how to serve without needing to be the hero of your own story. Porter didn't argue. We'll comply, he said. Morales nodded once. See that you do. Outside, the courtyard waited, quiet again, the kind of quiet that feels like forgiveness trying to take shape. The men filed out one by one, each slower than usual. No one looked at Emily directly. They didn't know how. She stepped aside to let them pass, her crutch marking the rhythm of her breath. Hart muttered, Ma'am. Davies stopped, met her eyes. Thank you for last night. She nodded. You're welcome. Try not to need it again. By evening, the base moved differently. Conversations dropped to respectful volume when she passed. In the mess line, soldiers shifted aside without being told. Not from pity, from correction. Something inside the culture had tilted. Ryan found her later, outside the tent again, the light soft around her face. How'd it feel? He asked. Unnecessary, she said. Necessary for them. Maybe. She looked toward the horizon where dusk bruised the sky purple. I just want to get back to work. You already did. Across camp, Davies sat at his bunk, a clipboard of reassignment orders in hand. Rehab center rotation 90 days. He read it twice. He thought about arguing, then thought about the soldier whose blood still stained his boots. Instead, he cleaned them slowly, deliberately, like ritual. At 500 the next morning, he reported to the medical compound. The nurse, small but unflinching, handed him a list. You'll refill water. Check vitals. Sit with patients who wake up disoriented. You won't talk about yourself. Yes, ma'am. Good, start with bed 3. He gets nightmares. He did as told. The man in bed 3 had one leg and a scar that cut across half his jaw. He told Davies a story about the dog who still slept on his boots every night, waiting for the leg that wasn't there. Davies laughed once, reflex, then stopped, embarrassed. The man smiled. It's okay, sailor. Humor's the only thing the blast didn't steal. Davies nodded, eyes hot. He stayed until the man fell asleep again, then sat in the hallway, head in his hands. The sound of beeping monitors filled the silence like penance. Morales visited the ward later that week. She didn't announce herself. She watched from the doorway as Davies adjusted an IV line, gentle, patient. When he noticed her, he straightened. "Ma'am." "Carry on," she said, and as she left she thought maybe he will. Meanwhile, life in the base continued. Missions ran, engines started. The world didn't stop for redemption, but it noticed. Ryan caught up with Emily near the motor pool a few days later. A young private dropped a socket wrench, flinched as it clattered to the ground. Emily bent, picked it up, handed it back. "You're allowed to be new," she said. The private smiled, nervous but grateful. When she turned, Ryan was watching. "Still teaching lessons. Just trying to keep people from breaking things they can't fix." She leaned on the crutch for a moment, testing her weight. The pain had dulled, replaced by that faint warmth that follows healing, not comfort, but endurance. That night in her bunk she found an envelope on the small table beside her gear. No name, just for Carter. Inside was a folded piece of lined paper. "I led an insult I didn't earn the right to speak. I can't take it back, but I can name it. I'm sorry. Signed, MD." She read it once, twice, then folded it again and slipped it beneath her pillow. Forgiveness wasn't automatic, but acknowledgement mattered. Outside, wind brushed against the tent like distant applause. The base was quieter these days, not heavy quiet, but respectful quiet. The kind that grows when people start choosing decency without being told. Somewhere in the dark, a voice over the comms tested a line. "Sierra 3-1, radio check." Emily smiled. She keyed her mic. "Copy, loud and clear." Ryan's voice came back soft. "Just making sure the line still works." "It does," she said. "It always will." She leaned back, eyes on the faint outline of stars through canvas. The desert was still unforgiving, the mission still dangerous, but inside this small circle of discipline and redemption, something had changed. Not dramatically, not loudly, just enough. Because strength, she thought, isn't proven in the blast. It's proven after, in how you carry the silence that follows. She drifted to sleep to the rhythm of the generators, that low heartbeat of purpose still pulsing under everything. The courtyard outside glowed silver under moonlight, empty and waiting, like a stage that had finally learned its lesson. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. The heat returned before dawn. It always did. Even the wind here seemed tired of carrying sand, but still it moved, whispering through antenna cables and loose tarps like an old voice that refused to die. By the time reveille cracked across the loudspeakers, the base was already awake, humming with engines and breakfast trays and the slow rhythm of routine. What had once been just noise now carried something steadier underneath it: respect. Emily Carter woke to that sound. She stretched carefully, testing the leg. The ache was still there, but duller now, more memory than warning. She slid the crutch aside, stood slowly and balanced. 2 breaths. No collapse. Progress measured in seconds. The mirror above the sink was small and warped. It caught only half her face at a time, which she preferred. The scar on her cheek had lightened, a thin silver trace of survival. She touched it once, not out of vanity but gratitude. "Still here," she whispered. The PA found her halfway through folding her uniform. "You're cleared for limited duty," he said. "That means paperwork, inventory, no heroics." "I'll try to disappoint you," she answered. He shook his head, smiling despite himself. Everyone smiled more lately. Outside, the flag cracked once in the wind. Across the yard, two new SEALs, fresh arrivals replacing the ones reassigned, crossed paths with her near the vehicle bay. They paused instinctively, boots aligning. One of them nodded. Not stiff, not fearful, just acknowledgement. She returned the nod and kept walking. It wasn't reverence, it was correction, the kind that stays. At the rehab center, Davies pushed a wheelchair towards sunlight. The man inside, Sergeant Owens, had learned to balance on a prosthetic leg and a wicked sense of humor. "You're getting better at not running me into door frames," Owens said. "I aim to impress," Davies replied. "You aim better now than you did before that courtyard mess." Davies winced. "You heard about that." "Everybody did. Bases don't keep secrets, they keep lessons." They stopped by a row of potted plants, desert flowers someone had insisted could survive here. Owens reached down, brushed the petals. "Funny thing," he said. "You water something enough, even this place learns to bloom." Davies looked at his hands, calloused, still red in places from constant disinfectant. "Maybe that's true for people too." "Then keep watering," Owens said, leaning back with a grin. Every evening after lights out, Davies stayed an extra hour, sanitizing stretchers, logging supplies. The nurse caught him once. "You're off duty, sailor." "I know." "Then go sleep." "Can't yet." She sighed. "Guilt's heavy. You'll build muscle carrying it." "Maybe it's not guilt," he said. "Maybe it's maintenance." She didn't argue. Maintenance sounded like healing. Back on base, Morales sat in her office, a mug of coffee cooling beside unread emails. She watched the window where the horizon melted into dust. Porter stepped in quietly, hat tucked under his arm. "How's the new rotation?" he asked. "Quieter," she said. "Quieter's good." He nodded, leaning against the doorframe. "I keep thinking about Carter." "She's not the type to need thinking about. She just keeps doing." "Still," he said, "people follow her." "She doesn't lead by speech. She leads by gravity." "Then maybe we ought to orbit closer." They shared a silence that wasn't awkward. Two veterans of bureaucracy realizing decency required less paperwork than expected. That afternoon, Emily limped to the training yard. Recruits were running casualty drills, dragging dummies across gravel. She watched a pair struggle with a stretcher strap. "Pause," she called out. The young corporal froze. "You're tying it wrong. It's not luggage, it's a life." She knelt slowly, corrected the knot, showed them how to loop pressure evenly. "Now try again. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast." The corporal repeated the motion, hands steadier this time. "Better," she said. "Now remember it when it's dark and loud." He nodded, sweat streaking dust down his face. She caught the look, the quiet kind of admiration that doesn't need a word. She turned away before it turned into gratitude. Later that night, she sat outside the tent with Ryan, both sipping instant coffee that tasted faintly of metal. The stars were fierce here, unblinking. "You ever think about leaving?" Ryan asked. "Every day," she said, "and every day I stay." "Why?" "Because somebody has to teach them how not to break." He smiled into his cup. "That's not in the manual." "It should be." A breeze kicked sand across their boots. Ryan tapped the side of his mug. "Davies sent a request," he said. "Asked to extend his rehab rotation voluntarily." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Voluntarily?" "Yeah," said, "he's not finished learning." She considered that. "Good. Maybe he'll teach someone else how to look again before they laugh." For the first time in months, she laughed, quiet, genuine, brief. Ryan joined her. It sounded almost normal. Weeks passed like that, unremarkable to anyone outside, transformative to those within. The base that had once been sharp with sarcasm softened into efficiency. Respect became casual, woven into conversation rather than forced by rank. Morales noticed it in reports that read less like excuses and more like truth. Porter noticed it when his men stopped talking over the radio and started listening. Dana noticed it in the way soldiers greeted MPs without that reflex of guilt. Change doesn't announce itself, It accumulates. Then came the letter. It arrived folded small, handwritten, no return address. Sergeant First Class Carter, it began, the new rank recently inked on her file. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I've seen what dignity looks like when it works beside you instead of against you. I'll keep learning. Thank you for letting me. M.D. She read it twice, then placed it inside her field journal between two blank pages. Not closure, not yet, but peace in progress. In March, the command rotated. Morales received orders for a new post, an installation where discipline had started to slip. On her last day, she stopped by the medical tent. Emily was cataloging supplies again, as if the universe had looped back to remind them where it began. "Leaving so soon?" Emily asked. "Bases need replanting," Morales said. "You'll make them grow." "And you'll keep them alive," Morales replied. She extended a hand. "Thank you for teaching this place how to behave." Emily shook it firm. "Thank you for listening when it did." Outside, the sun dropped behind the ridgeline, bleeding orange through dust. Morales watched the silhouette of the medic she'd once had to defend. She felt something like pride, not the loud kind that wears medals, but the quiet kind that lets you walk away knowing you left decency standing guard. In the rehab center, Davies ended his final shift by cleaning a tray table. The nurse appeared again. "Your reassignment came through. Supply Ops, Northern Sector." He nodded. "Figures. You gonna miss this place." He looked at the sleeping patients, at the steady rhythm of machines, at the silence that demanded gentleness. "Yeah," he said, "I think I will." She handed him a sealed envelope. "Mail came for you, no return." He opened it later under a flickering hallway light. "Petty Officer Davies, keep treating them well. That will be enough. E. Carter." He folded it once, slid it into the pocket where he used to keep a lucky coin. Maybe luck had changed shape. When he left the ward the next morning, he didn't salute the nurse. He just said, "See you around." She smiled. "Maybe, try not to trip over your own conscience." He laughed, real this time. Back on base, spring brought sandstorms that painted the world beige. During one, Emily stood by the door flap, watching visibility vanish to nothing. A young medic beside her muttered, "Feels like the end of the world." "No," Emily said. "Feels like a beginning that can't see itself yet." She turned, sat, and began checking trauma kits by touch, memorizing shapes and weights in the dark. "If you can't see," she told the medic, "you rely on what you know. The difference between panic and precision is breath." He nodded, mimicking her rhythm. "Inhale, count 2, exhale." The storm raged, inside order held. When the wind finally died, the base emerged coated in dust but intact. People stepped out blinking, coughing, laughing. Dana passed by, goggles pulled up, and shouted, "Still standing." "Mostly vertical," Emily called back. "That counts." That night the air was strangely clear, the stars sharper. Ryan played a song quietly from his phone, some old country tune about home. Emily listened, head tilted. "You miss it?" she asked. "Home? Yeah. Sometimes. But this," he gestured around, "the tents, the noise, the stubborn persistence of survival, feels closer to who I became." She smiled. "Then you're right where you should be." He looked at her. "So are you." The base lights dimmed on schedule, generators humming back to that steady heartbeat. In the quiet, Emily wrote a short entry in her journal. "Respect restored is stronger than respect assumed." She closed the book, lay back, and listened to the desert breathe. Far across the compound, Davies boarded a transport truck heading north. As it pulled away, he glanced once toward the courtyard, that same patch of ground where arrogance had burned and humility taken root. He touched the envelope in his pocket. The coin he no longer carried seemed lighter by comparison. He didn't wave. He just nodded toward the tents disappearing behind him, a silent salute to the lesson he'd earned the hard way. The road stretched ahead, pale under the moonlight. Somewhere beyond it waited new work, new faces, another chance to be better. He didn't plan to waste it. Back at the base, a new rotation of soldiers arrived. They'd heard whispers of a story about a medic who walked with a limp and taught an entire command the definition of honor. Most thought it was exaggerated, until they met her, until they saw the quiet way others straightened when she passed, not from fear but from memory. Emily Carter didn't notice. She had charts to fill, lives to keep ready, and a leg that still ached when it rained. Pain, she decided, was just proof you were still here to do the work. She turned off the light, letting darkness settle soft around her bunk. Outside, a radio crackled, once static, then Ryan's voice testing the line. Base ops to Sierra 3-1. She reached for the mic, smiled. Sierra 3-1 copies, still here. Good to know, he said. She set the radio down, closed her eyes, and let the hum of generators fade into the rhythm of her heartbeat, steady, stubborn, alive. Because some stories don't end with victory. They end with continuation, with footsteps that keep going, with a woman who limps and still leads. The desert had gone pale again by midsummer. Heat shimmered off every surface, softening edges until the base looked like a mirage that refused to disappear. The days blurred together, each one stamped with the same hum of machines and distant rotor thunder, yet something had shifted inside the rhythm. It was steadier now. Kindness had found a way to live here without permission. Emily Carter limped across the courtyard that morning, slower but upright, the crutch finally gone. The scar on her leg had thickened into a faint line that caught sunlight like a silver thread. She still moved with care, but she moved. Around her, soldiers nodded as she passed. They didn't stare at the limp anymore. They saw the continuation. In the language of the military, that was progress. Inside the medical tent, the air was thick with antiseptic and stories. New medics unpacked supplies while she oversaw inventory with the patience of someone who had learned the cost of rushing. Slow down, she told a private fumbling with IV tubing. You treat the equipment the way you treat the wounded, precise, never frantic. Yes, Sergeant. Breathe, she added. Everything that matters begins with that. The private smiled nervously, but his hand steadied. Teaching came naturally to her now. She stopped avoiding it, stopped doubting that she had anything left to offer. Survival had turned her into an instructor whether she wanted it or not. Later that afternoon, Morales's replacement, Major Collins, arrived unannounced, crisp uniform, deliberate stride. He found Emily sorting bandages. "Sergeant Carter," he said, "you have a moment." She stood, wiping her hands on a towel. "Sir." He handed her a folder. Inside was a single page, promotion recommendation, Sergeant First Class Medical Corps, already signed. "You earned this months ago," he said. "Paperwork just caught up." Emily stared at the page. "I didn't ask for it." "Good," he said. "That's usually how you know it's deserved." The ceremony was small, 5 people in a sun-bleached office that smelled faintly of coffee. Collins pinned the new rank, shook her hand, and said, "Congratulations, First Class." She replied, "Thank you, sir." That was all. No speeches, no applause. When it ended, she hung the certificate behind the supply cabinet, half hidden by a clipboard. She preferred her recognition where only the curious would find it. That evening she walked the perimeter, leg aching but cooperative. Ryan joined her halfway through, chewing gum and pretending not to limp himself from an old injury. "Heard you're official now," he said. "So they tell me. You gonna celebrate?" "I might alphabetize the trauma kits again." "Living dangerously, huh?" She smiled, "Always." They stopped by the old comms building, the same wall where the laughter had once echoed months earlier. The paint had faded, the stain of that day had not. Ryan noticed her glance. "You ever think about how far we've come since then?" She exhaled slowly. "Sometimes, and sometimes it feels like we're still walking through it." "Maybe that's what healing is," he said. "Walking through, not away." "Maybe." The next morning, an unfamiliar truck rolled through the gate. Supply rotation from the northern sector. She didn't notice at first until she heard the voice. "Permission to unload water crates, ma'am." She turned. Petty Officer Mark Davies stood there, sleeves rolled, face leaner, eyes clearer. The arrogance was gone. So was the weight of shame that had once bent his shoulders. He looked human. "Didn't expect to see you back here," she said. "Didn't expect to come back." He lifted a crate easily, set it down without noise. Transfer papers said temporary. Guess the universe disagreed. Guess it did. They worked in silence for a while, the kind that isn't awkward, just full. When the last crate was stacked, he straightened. "Rehab center ended my tour," he said, "but I stayed longer, volunteered." "I heard." He blinked. "You did." She nodded. "Word travels. Bases remember things, good ones too." He smiled faintly. "They let me train new medics on patient handling. Me, the guy who once mocked a limp." "Redemption has a sense of humor," she said. "I wrote you a letter once," he said. "I got it." He looked down, almost shy. "I never expected an answer." "You didn't need one." He met her eyes, still helped. A gust of wind lifted dust between them. For a moment it looked like the courtyard itself exhaled. Then the sound of a chopper overhead broke the stillness, shaking the air apart. They both turned, instinctively scanning the sky. Old habits. After the rotors faded, Davies said quietly, "You ever think about leaving?" She gave a small laugh. "Everyone keeps asking me that." "Then maybe you should." "Why that?" "Because you've already done enough for 10 careers." She tilted her head. "That's not how purpose works." He nodded. "I figured you'd say that." Days blended again, but not emptily. Davies joined her shifts when he could, hauling supplies, checking vitals, learning the small disciplines that don't make headlines. Once, when a training accident brought in a soldier with a dislocated shoulder, he moved without hesitation, supporting the patient's weight while she guided the bone back into place. "Breathe," she told both of them. "Pain's just proof of life." The soldier winced, then laughed. "You sound like my grandma." "She sounds wise," Emily said. Davies grinned. "She does." Later, as they cleaned the instruments, he asked, "You ever get tired of being strong?" She looked at him, brow furrowing slightly. "It's not strength," she said. "It's maintenance. You keep things from breaking until someone else can carry them." He nodded slowly. "Then you've been maintaining all of us." News of her promotion spread in the quiet way good things do, by rumor and smile. Younger soldiers started quoting her lines. "Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. Breathe once. Now talk." She never realized she'd become doctrine, but doctrine built on empathy holds. In the mess hall one evening, Dana slid into the seat across from her, tray balanced on one hand. "You've got admirers," she said. "Dangerous thing for a medic." "Maybe, but deserved." Emily poked at her food. "Admiration fades, respect sticks." "That's why they admire you," Dana said, "because you don't want it." Across the room, Davy sat with a group of logistics soldiers, listening more than speaking. He laughed once, easy and genuine. Dana followed Emily's glance. "He's changed." "People can," Emily said, "when they're given space to." "You gave him that." "He earned it." The next week the base held a joint training exercise. Sun blinding, sweat constant. Emily supervised the medical response unit, clipboard in hand, stopwatch around her neck. Davies volunteered to run transport drills. Halfway through, a simulated casualty went wrong, a real sprain, a real tumble, a real pain. Instantly he was there, kneeling beside the injured recruit, hand steady. "You're okay," he said. "Don't move." His tone mirrored hers so precisely that when Emily heard it, she almost smiled. He'd learned the cadence, the calm. The echo of her teaching had found another voice. When it was over, the recruit was fine, ankle wrapped, pride bruised. Davies returned to her side, face streaked with dust. "Guess I passed the test." She handed him a water bottle. "You stopped the bleeding before it started. That's the job." He nodded, drank, then said softly, You know, I used to think courage was noise. Now I think it's rhythm." She looked at him curiously. "Rhythm?" "Yeah, the heartbeat you keep when everything else panics." She smiled. "That's closer to the truth than most sermons." As dusk rolled in, the bass softened again. Lights flickered on, generators hummed back into their nightly song. Emily stood by the edge of the yard, watching the horizon blur. Davies approached once more, slower this time. "Leaving for rotation next week," he said. She nodded, "Back to the north." "Yeah, different base, new crew. Guess they want me to train medics there." "You'll do fine." He hesitated. "You think they'll listen?" "They will," she said, "because you'll listen first." He extended a hand. "Thank you for everything." She took it. "Just keep the lesson alive." "I will." He started to walk away, then stopped. "Hey, Sergeant." She turned. "Strength walks softer than you think," he said. She smiled. "Good line, keep it." "Already did." He left before dawn 2 days later. No ceremony, no farewell photo. Just one truck, one road, and the kind of silence that follows understanding. Emily watched from the edge of the courtyard, coffee in hand, sunlight crawling over her boots. For the first time, she realized the base didn't need her to hold it together anymore. It was holding itself. She exhaled slowly, the way she taught everyone else to. "Breathe once, now talk." To no one in particular, she murmured, "Still here." And somewhere far away, on another base under another punishing sun, a former SEAL repeated the same words to a room full of trainees. He told them about the medic who limped past his arrogance and saved his soul before saving anyone's body. He didn't say her name. He didn't have to. Stories travel faster than orders. Because respect, once planted, grows in places you never visit again. And sometimes, the quietest people leave the loudest echoes. The desert cooled by degrees when autumn finally remembered this part of the world. Nights stretched longer. The stars came closer. The base felt smaller, steadier, like something finished learning how to breathe. Emily Carter no longer needed the crutch. She still carried a faint limp, but it had become part of her cadence, one step deliberate, one step certain. The scar on her cheek had faded into a pale reminder of flame, a small signature of survival. Around her, new medics moved with the kind of energy she used to have. She trained them the way experience trains humility. "Don't chase heroics," she said one morning, packing between cots. "Chase accuracy. Speed without precision kills." Private Lee, barely 20, frowned. "Ma'am, what if they're bleeding fast?" "Then you slow down your mind," she said. "Fast hands follow calm heads." They wrote that on the whiteboard above the supply cabinet. It stayed there all rotation. Across the region, several hundred miles north, a convoy kicked dust into the same sky. Davies rode shotgun, scanning horizons with practiced patience. His uniform carried a medic badge now, the irony not lost on him. He'd finished his volunteer term at the rehab center, requested retraining, passed every exam. "You reinvented yourself," the nurse had said when he left. "Don't forget who helped with the blueprint." He hadn't. Her letter stayed folded in his breast pocket. The paper had softened from sweat and time, but the ink still held. "Keep treating them well. That will be enough." It had become his compass. The new base, smaller and less disciplined, tested him. Some men respected his background, others distrusted it. "A SEAL turned medic," one joked. "What happened? Lose your edge?" Davies smiled evenly, found a sharper one. He didn't argue, he simply worked, steady, unshowy, efficient. Within a month, their casualty drills improved. Within 2, no one laughed anymore. Back south, Emily spent evenings teaching triage through radio simulations. "Sierra 3-1, confirm pulse," she'd say into the headset, voice even as a metronome. Recruits copied her tone instinctively. Calm bred calm. Dana, now promoted to staff sergeant, stopped by once and leaned in the doorway. "You know your voice carries across the base at night. Hope it carries the right thing." "It does," Dana said. Sounds like discipline with empathy. We could use more of that frequency. The year turned. Sandstorms gave way to cold rain. Command briefings hinted at a new cooperative exercise, joint medevac between northern and southern sectors. Exchange training, Major Collins explained. We send one of ours north, they send one of theirs south. Fresh eyes keep complacency out. Emily nodded. When? Next week, we'll pair you with their laid medic, name's Davies. She didn't react at first. Then a corner of her mouth lifted, small and unguarded. Copy that, sir. When the transport plane touched down 3 days later, Davies stepped onto the familiar sand with that same mixture of anticipation and restraint he'd learned to live by. The base looked cleaner than he remembered, neater, quieter. People moved with purpose. He recognized her before she turned. Same steady posture, same measured movements, a little less pain. Time had made her edges deliberate instead of hard. Welcome back, she said. Didn't think I'd earn a return ticket. You did more than that. They shook hands, brief, firm. Neither needed to say the rest. The training began the next morning. They worked side by side through casualty scenarios, simulated blasts, timed evacuations, radio coordination. He followed her cues instinctively. She adjusted to his rhythm without thought. Where she was methodical, he was kinetic. Where he paused to think, she filled silence with clarity. It felt less like instruction and more like duet. After one exercise, he wiped sweat from his face. You know, you don't yell much for someone in charge. Yelling's for people who lost control. And you. I just borrow control until everyone else finds theirs. He laughed quietly, still the same Carter. Still the same student. Trying to be. Word spread through the compound that the exchange training felt different, less competition, more cohesion. Morales' legacy lingered in every procedure, invisible but present. On the third day, they handled a real emergency, a generator fire in the maintenance yard. One mechanic burned, another overcome by smoke. No simulation this time. Emily moved first, radio already in hand. Sierra 3-1 responding, 2 casualties, 1 inhalation, 1 thermal. Davies caught her tone mid-sentence and matched it. Copy, airway support inbound. The crew obeyed without hesitation. They stabilized both men before the flames even died. When command reviewed the footage later, someone asked, who led the response? The report simply read, Joint Leadership Carter Davies. Shared credit, balanced precisely the way both preferred. That night the mess hall filled with quiet celebration. Someone played guitar, someone else brewed contraband coffee strong enough to lift morale. Emily sat apart, cleaning her kit, when Davies approached with 2 cups. Figured you wouldn't get your own. You figured right. He set one down beside her. You ever think about how weird this is? You teaching me how to save lives I once thought I was above saving. Not weird, she said, necessary. He looked at her, eyes soft. You forgave me a long time ago, didn't you? I stopped needing to, she said. That's different. The lights flickered once, a reminder of how fragile peace always is. Outside, rain began again, rare, cold, cleansing. The smell of wet dust drifted in. She tilted her head toward the sound. Rain in the desert, she murmured, always feels like proof. Of what? That even here, something good can fall and not vanish. He nodded, guess we're proof too. The next morning brought orders, an unexpected live mission. A supply convoy from the east had hit an IED, casualties unknown, terrain unstable. They needed medics on standby for possible airlift. Carter and Davies were assigned jointly. She checked her gear, calm but alert. You ready? She asked. He adjusted his vest. Always. Remember, she said, fast hands follow calm heads. He grinned, heard that somewhere. The helicopter lifted off into pale daylight. The landscape below unfolded like an old scar, sand, road, twisted metal. As they touched down near the blast site, smoke curled against the sky. Soldiers moved like silhouettes through it. Two injured, one trapped in a vehicle. Carter's world narrowed to motion. Neil assessed pressure, pulse. Davies crawled into the wreckage without waiting for orders. Leg pinned, he shouted. Need leverage. She tossed him a pry bar, held his shoulder as he shifted weight. Together they freed the soldier, dragged him clear. When the dust settled, both were breathing hard but alive. Back aboard the chopper, Davies held the IV steady while she checked vitals. The engine roar made talking pointless. Yet he caught her glance, and in it was something unspoken. We did it right this time. He nodded. We did. Hours later, after debriefing, she found him outside the hangar, sitting on an ammo crate, rain drying on his sleeves. "You good?" she asked. He exhaled slowly. "I think so. Feels different saving someone when you used to be the one needing saving." She folded her arms. "Everyone needs saving eventually. The trick is remembering it when you're the one holding the bandage." He smiled. "I'll quote that." "Don't," she said, "just live it." They watched the horizon in silence. Dawn pushed color through clouds, thin pink over gray. Around them the base stirred again. Engines starting, orders shouted, another day in a world that never promised gentleness. But inside that noise something had settled, trust rebuilt from fracture. When he left a week later, she walked him to the flight line. "Back to your unit." "Yeah, they say I've got a talent for teaching medevac protocols." "You do?" He hesitated. "You ever realize we started as a lesson and ended as the proof?" She smiled. "Lessons don't end, they just get retaught." The rotors spun up. He climbed aboard, turned once, and saluted. She returned it, slow, deliberate, leg steady this time. The wind from the blades whipped dust around her, but she didn't flinch. The chopper rose, tilted north, and vanished into the bright distance. Back inside her office, she found the whiteboard still carrying that phrase, "Fast hands follow calm heads." She added another line beneath it in small, careful letters, "And calm hearts follow humility." She capped the marker, stepped back, and smiled. Outside, recruits were forming up for drills. Ryan's voice cut across the yard, half shout, half laughter. "You gonna join the fun, Sarge?" She called back, "Only if you promise not to faint this time." They laughed, easy and real, the kind of laughter that heals instead of wounds. As evening settled, she walked once more through the courtyard, the same ground where it had all begun. The air was cooler, the light kinder. She paused, listening to the hum of the generators, that familiar heartbeat of duty. Somewhere far away, another base would hear the same rhythm, carried by another soldier who once mocked a limp and now taught others how to stand. She closed her eyes and breathed. The world wasn't perfect, it never would be, but tonight it was honest, and that was enough. Because redemption doesn't announce itself. It walks quietly, limps a little, and keeps moving. And sometimes, the sound of one steady step is the loudest proof that a lesson took hold. The war slowed down, or maybe it only looked that way from a distance. News cycles moved on, but bases like theirs kept breathing, steady and unseen. The rhythm never stopped, just softened. And somewhere in that quieter tempo, people began to change. Emily Carter became an instructor almost by accident. One morning, Major Collins walked into the medical tent holding a memo. "Headquarters wants a senior field medic to run the new trauma leadership course," he said. She blinked. "You mean teach people how to stay calm?" "Exactly that," he said. "Apparently you're good at it." By the next week she had a classroom, a repurposed hangar with folding chairs, a whiteboard, and a coffee machine that hissed like it had opinions. The first class stared at her with the nervous half-smiles of soldiers forced into something that sounded suspiciously like therapy. She opened with a question. "Who here thinks courage means not being afraid?" Hands rose, hesitant. She shook her head. "Wrong. Courage is doing the job while fear sits next to you and won't shut up." Laughter broke the tension. A pencil tapped rhythmically. She drew a pulse line on the board. "This is adrenaline, it lies, it tells you to rush. Don't. Fast hands follow calm heads. Write it down." By the third session, they stopped pretending not to care. They listened. They stayed after class asking about the scar, the limp, the rumors. She never confirmed or denied anything. "Stories grow better in silence," she said. "Let the lesson matter more than the details." North of her, Davies lived the same lesson in reverse. He was teaching in the field, forward medical training for combat engineers who built bridges faster than they built trust. He carried a battered notebook where he wrote fragments he couldn't say out loud. Respect lives in repetition. Pain remembered is duty refined. When rookies panicked under pressure, he steadied them with one line: "Breathe once. Now talk." The words weren't his originally, but he owned them the way soldiers own scars borrowed from others. In early spring, orders arrived for a joint rescue exercise near the border ridge. Standard procedure: one northern, one southern team, simulated casualties, helicopter extraction. On paper, nothing complicated. But logistics in war zones have their own humor. Two convoys departed hours apart under a low, gray sky that promised rain and delivered more. Emily's team reached the ridge first. Wind sliced across the plateau, carrying grit and static. She set up triage markers, checked comms, waited. The radio crackled Davies' voice, distorted but clear enough. "Convoy Bravo 2 clicks out." "Copy, Sierra 3-1 standing by," she replied automatically, the call sign sliding from her lips like it had never left. 10 minutes later, the sound of engines filled the valley, then a thunderclap that wasn't weather. Dust jumped off the ground. "Explosion north approach," someone shouted. Training exercise or not, the body reacts the same. Adrenaline hit like a surge. Emily grabbed her kit. "Move." The lead truck had skidded off the track. Axle snapped, smoke rising from the hood. The blast had been a buried remnant, old ordnance no one had mapped. 2 men down, 1 trapped. Davies' convoy had been in the blast radius. When she reached them, he was already on his knees beside a soldier bleeding from the thigh. The sight hit her like déjà vu. "High and tight," she said, dropping beside him. "Already on it," he answered, pressing hard. Their hands met over the wound, blood seeping between fingers. Rain started, thin needles mixing with dust. She felt the shiver of recognition. Same smell of burning metal, same sound of engines idling helplessly, same choice: to stay until breathing steadied. Minutes stretched. The helicopter arrived, rotor wash flattening the grass. They loaded the injured, shouting against wind. The pilot gestured frantically, storm rolling in. Emily nodded, waved them off, then realized Davies wasn't moving. He'd stayed by the wreck, searching for the trapped driver. She limped toward him through mud. "Leave it." "Not yet," he yelled. "He's alive, I can hear him." The wind roared harder. She dropped to her knees beside him, flashlight cutting into the cab, a hand half buried under metal, pulse faint. "We don't have time," she said. "We make time," he replied, voice low, solid. Together they wedged the crowbar under the frame, muscles burning. The metal groaned, shifted. The driver gasped. "Pull!" The weight gave way. They dragged him free just as the chopper tilted back to land again. They lifted the man aboard, soaked, shaking, breathing. When the helicopter rose this time, both medics stayed on the ground, crouched in the storm, watching it vanish into cloud. For a moment neither spoke. Then Davies laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "You always find the hardest way to make a point." She wiped mud from her face. Lesson plans should leave a mark. By the time they got back to base, night had dropped hard. The injured would live. Reports filed, adrenaline fatting, silence replaced urgency. She found him sitting outside the hangar again, same posture as the night months ago. Rain dripped from the roof. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, just thinking how close that was. "Close counts when people survive," she said. He turned the thought over. "You know, I used to believe redemption was something you finished. Now I think it's something you maintain." She looked at him. "Maintenance again," she said softly. "Guess we finally agree on the word." The next morning, Command reviewed the mission. Praise came in careful phrases, commendations pending, exemplary cooperation, composure under duress. Neither of them stayed for the reading. They were in the medical tent, cleaning instruments. Gratitude felt heavier than blood. After the storm, both bases shared the footage. Soldiers watched the clip of two figures in rain pulling a man from wreckage and said nothing. Respect doesn't need narration. The silence afterward was enough. Weeks later, Emily returned to the classroom. She played the recording of that mission without comment. When the lights came up, she faced the room. "That's what teamwork sounds like," she said. "Not yelling, breathing." A recruit raised a hand. "Ma'am, is that you in the video?" She smiled faintly. "Doesn't matter, could be any of you. Just remember, pain will come. Your job is to stay kind anyway." Up north, Davies carried the same footage on a flash drive. He showed it to new medics, voice steady. "That's not heroism," he told them. "That's discipline under empathy. Learn that rhythm and you'll save more lives than you'll ever remember." Someone asked who the woman was. He answered simply, "A friend who taught me how to stand up straight." Summer rolled into another season of dust. The world outside still fought its wars, but within these two pockets of calm, a culture had changed. Emily's trainees spread out across units, repeating her phrases. Davies' medics mirrored her tone over radios he never touched again, and somewhere between them stretched a corridor of understanding, quiet, durable, alive. Late one night, after another long lecture, Emily stepped outside the hangar alone. The moon carved silver across the sand. She thought of the first day she'd limped past laughter, of the pain that had turned into patience, of the man who had mocked and then learned. The story had become legend among younger troops. They called it the courtyard lesson. She didn't correct them. Every base needs a myth, better it be one about grace. A distant helicopter crossed the horizon, its lights small against the dark. She raised a hand, not waving, just acknowledging. Somewhere inside that sound she could almost hear his voice through static. "Sierra 3-1, copy loud and clear." She smiled, whispering into the wind, "Copy. Always." Because redemption, she realized, isn't a single act. It's a loop, one breath, one rescue, one lesson at a time. And it keeps going long after the applause has gone quiet. The war ended the way most wars do, not with fireworks, not with clarity, but with exhaustion. Convoys stopped rolling. Orders slowed to a trickle. The desert, for the first time in years, was quiet enough to hear itself breathe. Emily Carter left active duty the following winter. Her discharge papers described it as honorable with distinction, but the word she preferred was complete. She'd given the uniform her youth, her body, her patience, her silence, and in return it had given her something that looked like peace. Not the soft kind, but the scarred version, peace that still flinched when helicopters passed, yet stayed standing anyway. She returned home to a small coastal town, where gulls screamed louder than mortars and salt lived in the air instead of dust. She rented a one-room apartment above a bait shop, filled it with mismatched furniture, and built a new rhythm. Wake early, make coffee, stretch the leg that never quite forgave her, then walk to the nearby veteran center. They asked her to volunteer twice before she finally said yes. Just a few hours a week, the director had said. She ended up staying full days. She didn't wear rank there. She didn't need to. The younger veterans came for therapy and stayed for her stories, the way she told them, without embellishment, without pity. Sometimes she'd lean forward and ask softly, "What's the hardest part right now?" When they said, "The guilt," she nodded. "Yeah," she'd whisper, "that's the one that doesn't heal, you just carry it better." Her limp was subtle now, more rhythm than reminder. She never hid it. It entered rooms before she did, steady and unashamed. And for the new generation of soldiers sitting in folding chairs with trembling hands and tired eyes, that limp meant something holy. It meant survival wasn't always straight. North of her, in another state, Mark Davies built a similar rhythm, one that started in the field and ended in classrooms. He had left the Navy after his final tour, joined a civilian rescue organization, and discovered that he was better at teaching than fighting. He moved from base to base, training emergency responders, rewriting manuals with an insistence on empathy. Under core competencies, he added a line no one expected. Composure is contagious. Train for silence before you train for speed. His trainees loved the phrase. Somebody even printed it on the back of their vests. He never took credit for it. 3 years passed before their paths crossed again. Not on purpose. Not through command or orders, just the quiet magnetism of shared history. It was late September, at a memorial ceremony held in a converted hangar outside Arlington. The plaque read honoring field medics and combat lifesavers of the post-conflict decade. Rows of folding chairs stretched across polished concrete. Flags hung still in the stale air. Photographs of lost faces lined the walls like constellations of memory. Emily arrived early, standing near the back with her hands folded, the same posture she'd used at too many briefings. She recognized no one, and yet she knew everyone. The same expressions, the same ghosts behind the eyes. When the speeches began, she barely listened. Words like valor and sacrifice drifted by, distant as echoes. Her gaze fixed instead on the names carved into the bronze. And then a familiar voice, soft but certain, spoke from behind her. "Didn't expect to find you in the back row." She turned. Davy stood there, older, calmer, clean-shaven, dressed in a gray suit that didn't quite hide the soldier beneath. The lines around his eyes were deeper now, not from age, but from everything he'd stopped hiding. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then she smiled. "You always did prefer the loud entrances." He chuckled. "Not anymore. These days I just slip in and hope nobody asks for an autograph." They stood side by side, quiet amid the crowd. The ceremony continued. Medals pinned to uniforms, names read, applause scattered and unsure. When the final salute echoed through the hangar, a hush settled that felt almost sacred. Emily exhaled slowly. Davies looked at her. "You ever think about that courtyard?" She nodded once. "Every time I limp past a mirror." He lowered his eyes. "I still hear it sometimes. That laughter, it's quieter now, but it's there." She glanced at him, gentle. "Good, you should hear it. It reminds you who not to be." He smiled faintly. "I tell that story to every class I train. Only I don't call it mine. I call it the lesson." She arched an eyebrow. "And what's the lesson exactly?" "That grace outranks pride," he said, "every single time." A silence stretched between them, long enough for both to feel the weight of what was once unspoken. Finally she said, "You did okay, Davies." He looked at her. "I had a good teacher." They left the hangar together, stepping into late afternoon light. The sky had that washed-out blue of early fall, where warmth still clings to the air but leaves already whisper about change. They walked without agenda, two veterans whose shadows stretched side by side but never overlapped. Near the parking lot, a young journalist intercepted them, fresh-faced, notebook trembling. "Excuse me," she said nervously. "Are you Sergeant Carter, the medic from the southern sector?" Emily blinked. "I used to be." The journalist smiled, starstruck. "Your story in the training archives. The incident, the way the SEAL unit turned around after." Emily held up a hand gently. "That story doesn't belong to me. It belongs to what came after." "But it inspired hundreds." "Then let it keep doing that," Emily said softly. "Just don't forget the lesson part." The journalist nodded, embarrassed, and drifted away. Davies laughed quietly, still allergic to credit. She shrugged. "Credit ends stories. I'm still living mine." They reached the edge of the memorial garden, a small patch of grass fenced by white rope. Rows of boots filled with poppies lined the path. Emily paused at one. The tag read a name she didn't know, but the year made her throat tighten. So many like him. So many unseen. Davy stood beside her, eyes lowered. "You ever wonder why we made it out?" he asked. She took a long breath. "All the time." And she looked up, sunlight touching her hair like a benediction. "Maybe because we had more to fix than to fight." The answer hung between them, simple, true, final. They stayed until the crowd thinned, then found a bench facing the field beyond the fence. Kids were flying kites out there, bright triangles against a sky that had seen too much. Emily smiled at the sight. "You know," she said, "when I was recovering, I used to dream about walking without thinking about it. Just walking, not counting the steps, not feeling watched." "Do you now?" "Sometimes, not always. But when I forget to notice, that's when I know I'm okay." He nodded. "Funny, I used to dream about being forgiven. Now I just try to be useful." She glanced at him. Same dream, different verbs. For a while neither spoke. The kites danced. The flags behind them flapped in half-hearted salute. And for the first time since that night years ago, both felt the same quiet ease, not triumph, not release, just the hum of something whole again. A breeze picked up. She reached into her jacket and pulled out a small folded paper, creased, yellowed, worn at the edges. "You recognize this?" she asked, handing it to him. He unfolded it carefully. The letter he'd written years ago. The one that said, "I can't take it back, but I can name it." "You kept it," he whispered. "Of course," she said, "proof of concept." He smiled. "Guess I owe you the same." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out another paper, thin, folded 100 times. Her handwriting stared back at her. "Keep treating them well. That will be enough." For a long moment, they both laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that comes from full-circle recognition. Above them, the sun began to dip. Light spilled over the bronze plaque, catching the engraved names in gold. The air smelled of grass and salt. Someone began playing a trumpet from across the field, slow, clear notes that carried too far to ignore. Taps. Every soldier knows it. Every soldier hears it differently. When the final note faded, she rose, brushing dust from her trousers. He stood with her. They didn't salute this time. They didn't need to. They'd already spent their salutes on the living. At the gate, before parting ways, he said, "You think the world ever really learns?" She paused, thoughtful. "Not all at once, but one person at a time, yeah, maybe." He nodded. "Then we did our part." She smiled, "Maybe just enough." They shook hands once more. Her grip was steady, his warm. Then they walked in opposite directions, her toward the sound of the ocean, him toward the hum of the city, each carrying a version of the same truth. Because the story wasn't really about who was right or wrong that day in the courtyard. It wasn't about medals or punishment or even redemption. It was about the moment everything cruel in a person met something unbreakable and lost. A wounded woman soldier walked past. Moments later, they all regretted everything. Not because she shamed them, but because she showed them the part of themselves still worth saving. Years later, her students would repeat her words in faraway bases, whispering them over the wounded like prayer. Davy's medics would use her calm as a metric, timing their breaths to the rhythm she taught. And somewhere in every quiet act of mercy, her ghost would smile, not haunting, just reminding. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts. And when it does, the echo lasts longer than the war.